Hello and welcome to another Sonic Lab. Today we have a little bit of special. I feel like I'm some kind of 90s assassin or special agent. I've got this case here, and inside this case is of course the new ARP Korg, depending on which way you look at it, Odyssey. It's got a beautiful ARP logo, and this case definitely starts the journey with this sort of sense of ooh. And it has to be said that, you know, the whole Korg ARP thing, there's been a lot made of how amazing it is that they've got together to create this remake of the Odyssey. And it is very true. I can't help but feel like we're supposed to be amazed at the kind of corporate stuff that's gone behind the scenes. I mean, but frankly, you know, to the end user, that's sort of irrelevant. So let's take a look at what's inside. So I'm just going to unzip and open it all up. And there we have it. That is in fact what you get inside. We've got the small format Korg ARP Odyssey, power supply and a couple of patch cables. Okay, so the first thing we're going to notice is it's not as big as the original. This is obviously, as we know, I think it's 86%. So it's smaller, more compact. This is the one that is modelled on the Mark III. There are other limited edition versions available, but they are just basically the paint job. There's nothing else different. As you can see, we've got the original ARP Odyssey Mark III over there, which is Dave Spears from GeForce Software. If you haven't already seen, check out his impressions of this against the original. He did a great video where he looked at it, and obviously Dave is kind of like an A-lister Odyssey expert because they made the Odyssey software synthesizer. The other thing that you're going to notice is there's no overshoot at the bottom of the keyboard, which basically means that the original Mark III had the keys sticking out over the edge, which was a crazy idea, so quite often you see them with broken keys. This one has none of that. So let's just take a look at the case and the rear panel. Case, this is made from, this part is metal and this part is some kind of high impact kind of resilient plastic, because the original had something similar, but it felt like it was some sort of layered cardboard Formica thing. Not quite sure what that is. We've got a external 9-volt DC power supply and a power switch. Power switch is momentary. It's got these in the EU. We have these regulations that mean you can't leave it on forever and it'll auto power off, which actually is a bit of a pain. We've also now got a MIDI input right here, and a USB connection. These are for MIDI only. We've got some audio connections. Here we have the expression pedal. This is all on the original. Portamento foot switch. And we've got outputs. As on the original, we've got a low output and an XLR output. To my ears, the low output is quieter than on certainly the ARP Mark III we've got here. And then coming along, we've now got an external audio input for processing external audio, a separate headphone jack with a dedicated level control, which is nice and handy, and then CV in and out, gate in, gate out, trig in, trig out, which are, like on the original, these are 1/8" jacks, so we can hook it up to our external modular gear. In terms of build quality, the faders, yes, they are a bit wobbly to be honest, but they do have a much nicer cap on them than the original ARPs, and to be honest, the faders were kind of wobbly on the original as well. I suspect these are perhaps a little bit more so. And in terms of the switches are pretty much bang on the same as they were on the original. Probably the most contentious part is this slim keyboard. This is a 3-octave keyboard. It has so they're still quite longer than mini keys and thinner than keys, so smaller, and it's a curious one. I mean, obviously to fit it inside this really rather pleasing form factor, they've had to make the keyboard smaller. And the thing is, for some people, this is a problem. I've got actually pretty small hands, so it's not for me. The keyboard itself actually is quite nice. It feels a lot nice and quiet, you know, it's nice and damp, so it doesn't have that sort of clunky feel. So I've just plugged this in via USB to my host computer. I've got inputs for control, MIDI and keyboard. Keyboard is obviously the keyboard. Control, I was rather hoping, oh, maybe it does transmit some of these as CCs, but no such luck. So what about the proportional pitch and mod pads here? No, nothing going on. So as far as MIDI implementation goes, it's very basic. Fixed velocity, fixed channel, and no real controller data whatsoever. So one of the big deals about the synthesizer is obviously we've got the ability to switch between all three filter revisions here. So here's a sawtooth. This is the type 1, this is the 12 dB white face filter, which I think sounds lovely. Bring a bit of resonance in. Very nice. Type 2 is the so-called Moog infringement filter. It's got a bit more of a brassy quality. Loses a lot of bottom end when you take the resonance right up. And finally the Rev 3, which is the one that's native to this actual livery. So this is seems to have a sort of slightly smoother resonance response. Both of these have nice bottom end. The other big deal is they've added a drive circuit. A drive circuit obviously wasn't present on the original, and the drive circuit, what that does is just add post-filter drive. So out, this is filter type 1. In, when you get a bit of resonance going on. And in filter 2. And filter 3, in, out. It just kind of brings out all those kind of resonant harmonics and makes it a bit more aggressive. I mean, not that this synth didn't have plenty of that in the first place, it just now adds, maybe brings it more into line with some of the more modern synthesizers which have more filter drive and those kind of things going on. The other thing that's kind of an issue with the synthesizer, and it's not really the Korg version or the reboot version, is the tuning of the oscillators. Now with the oscillators, there's only a coarse and a fine tuning. There is no center dent or anything. So if we just go here and play a square this time, we've got a full width coarse frequency, and then the fine tune for getting it sorted out. Now if I wanted to bring a second wave in, I've got to kind of get it in by ear, and that means that, you know, there is a certain amount of flying by the seat of the pants, shall we say. If you were playing live and you wanted to change sounds between songs and you had to change the interval with oscillators, for instance, you know, you might get a bit scared thinking, well, I've got to kind of get it in and figure out how that's going to work, because obviously if you can hear it, then the audience can hear it. So as you can see, I've hooked up the second ARP Odyssey. I've got the original here, which is this one is the GeForce software kind of concourse version. It's got the Lumina upgrade, which has got all the little LEDs on top of the faders, and it's also got the switchable filter types between, I think, Rev 2 and Rev 3. I'm not going to get into a kind of which does which better, because frankly, you know, I think Dave did a really good job of that, and he knows them really well and got those signature sounds and did some comparisons. But I thought it'd be a good idea to see what happened when we got it on the scope, and what I've got here is an actual proper scope borrowed from Electronics Engineer. So the top one is the original ARP, the bottom one is the Korg Reboot. So we'll start off with the original. This is a sawtooth wave, and this is the sawtooth wave of the Korg. Now you can see they're pretty damn close. There is a bit more of a curve perhaps on the top sawtooth, but it's very close. So if I then bring the pitch up a bit, you can see it starts to get a bit more precise, and they start to look almost identical. Take them down to a lower pitch. So now let's try the square wave. We'll start on the Korg. So there's the square wave there. If I move the pulse width about, you see we're going from 50% to a minimum. We'll bring the square wave, we've got the square wave on the ARP as well. Now there is a difference here. I'm told that that kind of slope on the top it's not something we can hear. The important thing is the verticalness of the line of the square wave, and then the difference between those. So basically move the pulse width on this guy as well. There we go. So there you have it. The scope doesn't lie. I'd say those waveforms are pretty damn close. I mean, there is a slight difference, but that's what the scope says. So how does it sound? Well, here I've got 2 square waves tuned to approximately the same amount. I'm just going to play them, filter open. Bit of portamento. Incidentally, the portamento has 2 modes. There's a little switch here that allows you to switch it between the Rev 2 and Rev 3, which changes the, I think it's the curve, to be honest. It's hard to tell. So let's switch the drive in. Bring the filter down. So yeah, it does that kind of nice big pulse width. You know, I'm a fan of pulse width, tune kind of sound, but there's some interesting stuff going on here as well, because obviously this is a duophonic keyboard. So it doesn't work in the same way as you would normally have with a note priority, so you can't. What's happening here is when I hit the second, it's actually playing the second note, so I can play, take the drive out, switch them into saws. Pressing one note is unison, second note then plays the second oscillator. That's kind of interesting. Let's bring the ring mod in as well. And that introduces some very interesting stuff when we play as duophonically. And these are some of the things that I know it's been widely said that I think Billy Currie said, you know, it's the first punk synth. And these are some of the things that give it that unpredictable quality. And the thing about the ring mod is it's played off the interval of the keyboard. I take it up. You get these kind of very musical ring mod intervals, which is quite nice. Something else it's also extremely well known for, the sync sound. So, sawtooth, bring the second one up. You can hear I've got the frequency modulation happening on the ADSR over here. Now switch into sync. So it does do the sync sound really nicely, and in many ways it's kind of almost the signature to a lot of, certainly in the UK, the ways that the ARP was used back in those days. So although this instrument's only got 1 LFO, it can do more things with it, I think, perhaps than other synthesizers seem to be able to. So this sound, I've got a bit of sample and hold dialed in on the filter. But pressing the modulation, I get a sine wave from this LFO as well. And then if I wanted to bring some more, I can dial in the square wave. So I've got square wave modulation on the same rate, sine wave, and also the sample and hold. So that gives you this sort of incredibly musical ways of using a single LFO, and I suppose, you know, it's like faux sync, isn't it? You can sync all of them, but that's only because you're using the single LFO, and that's just the way it goes. Not only that, but we've also got the ability to bring in a high pass filter, so we could fit it into the mix a little bit more. I mean, that would have been great to have some resonance on this high pass filter, because I love a resonant high pass filter, and that's something that I've really liked to have seen, but I guess that's taken it away from what the original Odyssey was. And I guess that's the problem with when you do a reboot, you always get people go, well, yeah, it'd be great if it could do this, and it'd be great if it could do that. I mean, I doubt very much whether we've got the same kind of DIY approach on the circuit board on this, with all sorts of patch points and modification potential, because of the way that it's sort of licensed through David Friend and the kind of, you know, the original relationship with ARP. I don't know whether that's going to be possible like we've seen with the MS-20 kit and the MS-20 Mini. But, you know, there's obviously a reason why the synthesizer was so popular when it was first manufactured in all its revisions, aside from it being an affordable synthesizer at the time, and that is, you know, because it was so musical. I mean, I think we are paying a little bit of a premium in this version purely because, you know, of the ARP and the brand and the complications that might be going on outside of just the pure manufacturing costs of making this thing. And for that, it does feel like it's a little bit expensive to me. I think it's about 779 UK pounds, about a grand, $1,000. And it just feels to me like it could be cheaper when you kind of put it up against the MS-20 Mini, which again is another iconic mono synthesizer and not especially different perhaps in terms of manufacturing costs. In fact, one you could argue that that would cost more because it's got more jack fields and therefore more electrics and stuff going on with it. So I just feel that this is perhaps a little bit more expensive than it needs to be. If it was a little bit cheaper, it would be an absolute no-brainer. I mean, obviously Korg are going some way to remedy that by bringing this attractive case into it, and that definitely, as a luggage freak, that really does make me feel kind of warm inside. And there's no doubt, you know, obviously, if you were to buy an original ARP Odyssey, it would cost you a hell of a lot more than this. And also, you'd have all of that hassle associated with having something that is so old, all the servicing charges and things going wrong all the time. So if you want that ARP sound, and believe me, a lot of people do, I'm sure Korg wouldn't have made it otherwise, then this is pretty much the only way to go, and it is absolutely bang on. I mean, as far as I can tell, I mean, I know Dave, being the expert, was saying that there were differences, but I suppose one could argue that differences would be found between two synthesizers of the same age, just purely because of the way that they age differently. So it's damn close, if not absolutely spot on, and it really does give you that authentic ARP sound. And if that's what you want, limitations and all, then this is it.